Maxim stood by the central fountain in the heart of the old city, watching the water jets dance under the late afternoon sun. This was his one brief moment of solace between shifts, a pause to catch his breath before the grind resumed. Life wasn't easy. He juggled 2 jobs. Mornings spent at a small coffee shop and evenings delivering packages. Every day was the same, relentless, exhausting, and barely enough to cover the rent on his cramped one-room apartment. The fountain was the old city's centerpiece, surrounded by majestic stone buildings with faded facades that whispered stories of a bygone era. Tourists wandered around, snapping photos and chattering in various languages. But to Maxim, this place was an oasis of calm in his chaotic existence. Suddenly, a voice cut through the hum of the crowd behind him. "Maxim, is that really you?" He turned to see a man who looked like he had stepped out of a luxury magazine. It was Petro, a long-lost schoolmate whom Maxim hadn't seen in over a decade. Back in their school days, Petro had been the leader of their pack, the charismatic one who always had a scheme or a joke up his sleeve. But the man standing before him now was worlds apart from the boy Maxim remembered. Petro exuded success. His tailored suit fit him like a glove. His watch gleamed with the kind of luxury Maxim had only seen in store displays, and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingered as Petro reached out to shake his hand. "Well, what a surprise. You've changed, but I'd recognize you anywhere," Petro said with a grin, his confidence as palpable as ever. They struck up a conversation. Maxim kept his answers brief, glossing over the details of his struggles. Meanwhile, Petro spoke with ease about his extravagant life. A sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood, a chauffeured car, mingling with local celebrities, and hosting opulent parties. It all sounded like a dream, the kind Maxim had long since buried under the weight of reality. Petro noticed his silence and leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, you seem like you could use a little financial boost," Petro said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Maxim froze. The remark hit too close to home, yet he couldn't deny the truth. Money was always tight, and the idea of breaking free from his struggles gnawed at him daily. "What kind of boost?" Maxim asked cautiously, his heartbeat quickening. "A job. Nothing complicated," Petro said, flashing a disarming smile. "You'd just be delivering packages from point A to point B. That's it. No questions, no hassle. The pay's good, really good. Do a few runs and you could live like I do." The offer hung in the air like a forbidden fruit. Petro spoke as if this was a casual favor, not something to be scrutinized. His smile never wavered, his confidence unshakable. Maxim hesitated. His mind raced with doubts, but the temptation was undeniable. Was this his ticket out of mediocrity? Could this be the chance to finally escape the relentless grind and start living, not just surviving? "Think about it, but don't take too long," Petro said, giving Maxim a friendly pat on the shoulder. "I'm only in town for a few days." And with that, Petro disappeared into the bustling crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Maxim remained by the fountain, staring at the ripples of water reflecting the soft glow of the evening sky. His brief moment of peace was shattered. 2 voices clashed in his mind. One warning him to stay away from something that felt too good to be true, the other whispering of a life filled with the opportunities he'd always dreamed of. The choice seemed simple, yet it carried a weight that left him standing there, frozen in uncertainty. Maxim leaned against the chipped stone edge of the central fountain, letting the sound of rushing water drown out the noise of the bustling city. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of his next delivery shift, but he ignored it for a moment longer, savoring the rare calm. Life was a slog. 2 jobs, barely enough money to scrape by, and no end in sight. "Maxim? That you?" The voice startled him. Turning, he saw a man who seemed out of place in this weathered square. The suit was too sharp, the watch too shiny, the smile too perfect. "Petro?" Maxim blinked. Couldn't be. It was Petro, his old school friend, though he was hardly recognizable now. Back in the day, Petro had been the loud, cocky kid always skirting trouble. Now he looked like he owned half the city. "Man, it's been years. Petro's handshake was firm, his grin wider than Maxim remembered. "You're still here." His gaze swept over Maxim's worn jacket and scuffed shoes. "Yeah, working," Maxim mumbled. "Still grinding, huh?" Petro chuckled, leaning in conspiratorially. "You don't have to. I've got something that could change everything for you." Maxim frowned. "What do you mean?" "A job." Petro glanced around, lowering his voice. "Simple stuff. You pick up a package, drop it off. Easy money. And I mean real money." Maxim hesitated. "What kind of package?" Petro waved the question away. "Don't worry about that. You trust me, right?" His grin turned razor-sharp. "One delivery, and you'll make more than you do in a month. Think of what you could do with that." The words lingered, heavy with temptation. Maxim thought about his empty fridge, the bills piling up, the endless grind of his days. Petro clapped him on the shoulder. "Think it over, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this, they don't wait." And just like that, Petro was gone, melting into the crowd. Maxim stared into the rippling fountain, his heart pounding. Something about Petro's offer didn't sit right. But then again, neither did his dead-end life. One package, one delivery. What could possibly go wrong? The next evening, Maxim waited on a dimly lit corner, his hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets. The city felt different tonight, darker, heavier. Petro's words echoed in his head. Easy money. One delivery. A sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of him. The window lowered just enough for a hand to slide out, holding a small, nondescript package. "Drop this at the old warehouse on 12th Street, the driver said curtly, not even glancing at Maxim. The package felt oddly light in his hands. Before Maxim could ask any questions, the car sped off, leaving him alone under the flickering streetlight. He stared at the package, his pulse quickening. There were no labels, no markings, just plain brown wrapping sealed with tape. The walk to the warehouse felt like an eternity. Every shadow seemed alive. Every passing car felt like it was watching him. By the time he reached the warehouse, his nerves were frayed. The place was a skeleton of its former self. Broken windows, rusted doors, graffiti-scrawled walls. A single bulb hung above the entrance, casting a sickly yellow glow. Inside, it was even worse. The air smelled of damp concrete and stale cigarettes. In the corner, two men loomed in the shadows, their faces barely visible. One of them stepped forward, his neck adorned with a tattoo of a coiled snake. "You're late," Snake Tattoo growled. Maxim swallowed hard and held out the package. The man snatched it from his hands, inspecting it briefly before nodding to his partner. A moment later, a crumpled envelope was shoved into Maxim's chest. "Get out," Snake Tattoo said. Maxim didn't need to be told twice. He bolted out of the warehouse, his heart racing. Once he was a safe distance away, he ducked into an alley and tore open the envelope. His breath caught. Cash. More than he'd ever seen in one place. More than a month's wages for 10 minutes of work. He stuffed the money into his pocket, but the excitement was quickly replaced by unease. The job had been too easy, too anonymous. He didn't know what was in the package, and he wasn't sure he wanted to know. But as he made his way back to his tiny apartment, one thought kept him up all night. What if I do one more? Maxim didn't wait long before accepting Petro's second job. The first delivery had been too easy. No questions, no problems, and more money than he'd ever earned in weeks. He told himself he'd do one more run, just to save up a little extra. This time, the package was larger. The same black car, the same curt instructions. 12th Street. Don't ask. The walk to the warehouse was less nerve-wracking than the first. Maxim knew the route now, but the sinking feeling in his chest had grown heavier. The package, tightly taped and slightly heavier than the last, felt like a ticking bomb. Inside the warehouse, Snake Tattoo and his partner waited. The exchange was the same as before. A quick inspection, a curt nod, an envelope stuffed with cash. But this time, Maxim didn't leave immediately. As he turned to go, he heard Snake Tattoo mutter, "Delivery looks clean. Product's good. Boss will be happy." The word product hit Maxim like a brick. His stomach churned, but he kept walking, pretending he hadn't heard. Outside, under the flickering streetlight, he hesitated, staring at the package still lingering in his mind. What had he just delivered? That night, sleep didn't come. The wad of cash on his bedside table stared back at him, taunting him. It was more money than he'd ever seen, but the price of earning it felt heavier with each passing hour. By morning, his curiosity got the better of him. He called Petro. "Hey, about these deliveries. What's in the packages?" Maxim asked, trying to sound casual. Petro's laugh came sharp and cold over the phone. "Max, do yourself a favor. Don't ask stupid questions. You don't want to know." The call ended before Maxim could press further. That afternoon, during his third delivery, the tension reached a boiling point. He passed a group of strangers on the street, and one of them gave him a look. Not just curious, but wary. Almost afraid. By the time he reached the warehouse, he couldn't take it anymore. As soon as he was out of sight, he tore the package open, his hands shaking. Inside were several small, sealed bags filled with white powder. Maxim's breath hitched. His body went cold. He didn't need to be a genius to know what it was. Drugs. His pulse thundered in his ears as reality crashed over him. He wasn't just delivering anonymous packages. He was a courier in a drug operation. His hands had already touched something illegal, something that could ruin his life in an instant. He thought about walking away. But how could he? Petro knew who he was. Snake Tattoo knew his face. And worst of all, Maxim knew the kind of people who ran operations like this didn't let anyone leave alive. He handed over the opened package that evening, pretending nothing had happened. Snake Tattoo barely glanced at it before shoving the cash into Maxim's chest and turning away. Maxim left the warehouse with a growing sense of dread. The cash in his pocket no longer felt like freedom. Felt like a chain. As he walked home, he realized two things. First, Petro hadn't given him an opportunity, he'd trapped him. Second, he had no way out. Maxim knew he couldn't keep doing this. The drugs, the shadowy warehouse, Snake Tattoo's dead-eyed stares. It all weighed on him like a noose tightening around his neck. But what scared him more was Petro. Petro wasn't just an old-school friend anymore. He was something else entirely. Someone who had Maxim under his thumb. The fourth delivery came faster than Maxim expected. A different car picked him up this time, a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver was a woman. Sharp eyes, red lipstick, and a cold smile that barely concealed her impatience. She tossed him a larger package, this one wrapped in black plastic, and slid a handgun onto the dashboard where he could see it. "Don't mess this up," she said, her voice as smooth as silk but sharp enough to cut. Maxim swallowed hard and nodded. The package felt heavier than before, and the presence of the gun made his palms sweat. The delivery instructions were different this time. No warehouse, no Snake Tattoo. Instead, he was told to take the package to an upscale hotel downtown and leave it in room 406. The change in routine made his stomach churn. As he made his way to the hotel, every step felt like he was being watched. The black SUVs that passed him on the street, the faces in the crowd that lingered a second too long. They all felt like they belonged to Petro's world now. When he arrived, the lobby was blindingly bright, filled with wealthy guests sipping cocktails and chatting. Maxim stuck out like a sore thumb in his worn-out clothes, but no one stopped him as he stepped into the elevator. The ride to the fourth floor was suffocating. His mind raced with questions. What's in the package this time? Why the hotel? And why the gun? As he reached room 406, he raised a trembling hand to knock. Before his knuckles could touch the door, it swung open. A woman stood there, wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of wine. She was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, her dark eyes scanning him with icy precision. Behind her, the room was littered with luxury. Champagne bottles, designer clothes, stacks of cash scattered across the table. "You're late," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Maxim hesitated, but the weight of the package in his hands pushed him forward. He placed it on the table, next to a silver handgun lying casually amid the chaos. "Petro said you were reliable," the woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. She poured herself another glass of wine, not bothering to offer him any. Let's see if he was right. She picked up a knife from the table and slashed the plastic wrapping open. Maxim flinched as bricks of white powder tumbled out, each stamped with a strange symbol he didn't recognize. Her expression softened, but only slightly. Clean, she muttered to herself before turning back to him. Now get out. Maxim didn't need to be told twice. He backed toward the door, his eyes flicking nervously between the gun on the table and the woman's cold stare. As he reached the hallway, she called after him. And tell Petro he owes me. If this shipment isn't what we agreed, I'll find him, and I'll find you. The elevator ride down felt even worse than the one up. His mind raced, heart pounding as he clutched the envelope she tossed at him on the way out. He didn't dare open it until he was back in the safety of his apartment. Inside was more money than he'd ever seen. Stacks of crisp $100 bills. It should have been thrilling, but all Maxim felt was dread. He sat at his kitchen table staring at the cash. His phone buzzed. A text from Petro. Good work. Same time tomorrow. Maxim's chest tightened. He thought about the woman's cold eyes, the gun on the table, and the drugs spilling from the package. He thought about Snake Tattoo's muttered warnings, the SUV with tinted windows, and Petro's laugh echoing in his ears. There was no way out, but Maxim knew one thing for certain. If he didn't find a way to escape soon, he wouldn't survive much longer. Maxim knew he couldn't go on like this. The money was a trap, the drugs a death sentence, and Petro was worse than any enemy. He wasn't a friend. He was the puppet master, pulling strings that tightened around Maxim's throat. The next morning, Maxim took all the cash he'd earned and hid it under a loose floorboard in his apartment. He stared at the stash for a long moment, torn between greed and fear. Then he grabbed his phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Andriy. They'd grown up on the same street, best friends once, before Andriy joined the police force and their lives diverged. Andriy's voice was wary when he answered, but Maxim wasted no time. I need your help, he said, his voice cracking. I'm in trouble. By nightfall, they met in the parking lot of an abandoned grocery store. Andriy listened in grim silence as Maxim spilled everything. The deliveries, the drugs, the guns, the money. You know what you're asking, right? Andriy said finally. Petro's not just some thug. If you go up against him, he'll kill you. Or worse. Maxim nodded. I don't have a choice. Andriy sighed, then leaned closer. We'll need evidence. Something solid. Something that ties him directly to the operation. Can you get that? Maxim hesitated, then nodded again. He had no choice. The next delivery felt like walking into his own execution. Petro had sent him back to the hotel to the same woman. This time, her greeting was colder, her patience thinner. You're late again, she snapped, tossing him a glare. Maxim said nothing, sliding the package onto the table. As she opened it, he subtly adjusted the lapel of his jacket, ensuring the tiny camera Andriy had given him had a clear view of her hands as they inspected the drugs. The minutes dragged on like hours, but finally, she waved him off. You can go. He left without a word, his heart racing. The next day, Petro called. Good work, Max, he said, his voice smooth as ever. You're moving up. I got a bigger job for you this time. Meet me at the warehouse tonight. Maxim's stomach twisted. He didn't reply, hanging up instead. The recording from the night before had been enough to tie the operation to Petro's network. But Andriy had warned him, we need Petro himself in action. The warehouse was darker than usual when Maxim arrived. Petro stood near a table piled with cash and packages, flanked by Snake Tattoo and 2 other men. All of them carried guns. You've been doing good work, Max, Petro said, lighting a cigar. Reliable, quiet, just the way I like it. Maxim forced a nod, his hands sweating in his pockets. The tiny recording device was hidden there, capturing everything. Petro gestured to the table. This next one's big. You'll drive it yourself, straight to the border. No stops, no questions. Maxim hesitated, and Petro's eyes narrowed. Something wrong? No, Maxim said quickly. I'll do it. But Petro wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, his smile fading. You've been acting strange, Max, nervous. Like you're hiding something. Before Maxim could respond, the doors of the warehouse burst open, flooding the space with blinding light. Police! Don't move! The next moments were chaos. Snake Tattoo reached for his gun but was tackled to the ground. Petro grabbed the nearest package and bolted for the back exit, but Maxim stepped into his path. You! Petro snarled, his face twisted with rage. He lunged, slamming Maxim against a stack of crates. Maxim's head spun, but he held his ground. It's over, Petro. You're done. Petro's fist crashed into Maxim's jaw, sending him to the ground. As Petro reached for his own gun, a sharp command echoed through the warehouse. Freeze! It was Andrei, his weapon trained on Petro. The room fell silent as Petro dropped the gun and raised his hands, his cold smile returning. Well played, Max, he said, his voice dripping with venom. You think you're free now? You think they won't come for you? Maxim said nothing, watching as the officers cuffed Petro and led him away. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel because that's what inspires me to write interesting stories for you. Share in the comments why you listened to this story to the end, write what you wanted to hear the next story about.